Welcome back to another episode of Kicking It with Coach Red, where we bring you all the news, stories, takes, and opinions about your favorite teams from the Pacific Northwest, from the good to the bad to the Mariners.
The somber Mariners.
We're not going to do any breakdowns. We're not going to do any picks to click. We're not going to preview the series coming up against the Giants. Not going to do any of that.
Nope.
But before we dive into that, this is going to be a big changes happen today for the Mariners. Scott Servais relieved of duties. Dan Wilson in as full-time manager. We're going to talk about that tonight. But before we do that, I want to tell you a little bit about us. If you're looking for a guy that just had a heart for the Mariners and just had passion, seemed to be like a great fit, just like me for this podcast, it's my boy Scott Servais. Cheers, Scott. We appreciate everything that you've done for the team in the city over your tenure. Arguably one of the best managers that the Mariners have ever had. And if you're looking for a guy that feels that strongly about Scott Servais or Scott Servais, if you will, you're looking for a guy like me, your boy, Coach Red. You can find me on X at the real Coach Red, on Instagram at the real _ Coach Red, TikTok at the real Coach Red. Also find the show over on YouTube. Search Kicking It with Coach Red. Like, subscribe, hit the bell notifications, and leave a comment or two. If you're looking for a guy, he's not going to get as wild. He's not going to put in all the time. He's just Scott Servais light. But goddamn, if he didn't love Scott Servais just as much as the next guy. If you're looking for a guy like that, you're looking for a guy like Cain.
Yeah, you can find me over on Twitter at K2406, TikTok, K0634. Also follow the show's socials over on Twitter and Instagram at Coach Red Pod. Falls. Do it, freaking do it. Yeah, so today has just been a whirlwind. You get last night, Ken Rosenthal drops an article from the Athletic.
Even before that, the 1-8 road trip,
Getting swept twice didn't help.
You knew the writing was on the wall. We were planning on recording last night, and I said, "There's no point. We're going to talk about this, and then there's probably going to be something that pops up, and we're just going to talk about the same thing." And it sucks that Scott Servais had to be the scapegoat. Did this team underperform this year?
Massive.
In some regards, yes. In some regards, no.
Right.
I'm going to say with their bullpen about is what it is, right? It's had its ups and downs. You've had key injuries to guys that you anticipated being available, primarily Brash and Santos.
You know what? When Spires went down
and Spire,
that hurt. Then he came back.
Same with Sauce. So the bullpen is what we thought it was going to be. The starting staff took a major leap forward this year. You knew they were good, but you didn't know that they were this good.
Right. I mean, during the road trip, right, you had back-to-back games of Bryce Miller and Brian Wu on the road throw 7 scoreless innings out of your 4 and 5 in your rotation, and you lose that game. Both games, as soon as your relief staff comes in, and they are your leverage guys.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
But what this boils down to is their performance at the plate. Have there been some bad luck breaks? Yes. When you're getting into the dog days of summer and JP gets hit on the hand, Grant wasn't having a great year. Julio, in terms of power, was having a down year, but his underlying numbers were still there. He's still getting on base at a fairly high clip, especially for this team, but the power numbers weren't there. When you look at this team and Mitch Haniger is currently number 2 in RBIs, that's a problem.
A major problem.
And the
all your acquisitions didn't pan out the way you wanted
and your focus in the offseason, what the bill of goods that was sold by Jerry DiPoto and company was, we're going to cut back on the strikeouts. They're on pace for an all-time record, and that's with removing Teoscar, Kelnick, and Suarez, who were some of the biggest strikeout guys in the game. Rayleigh has had his times of big strikeouts. Dylan Moore doesn't get a ton of playing time, big strikeout guy. Julio's seen an uptick. Cal's your boomer bust guy. You expect some of this, but your on base guys, they don't really have that.
Well,
is that a process of Scott Servais not being able to instruct them? Because here's my big problem. Yes, you have a hitting coach. Yes, you have a manager. Those guys aren't in the box all the time, right? And we do have to
Right.
put some of the onus on the players. And I think that because they have performed so poorly offensively, people are pressing. They are in a position
Yes.
where they are trying to play hero ball more often than not, even early in the games. And that's why you're seeing some of these swings and misses. Mitch Garver, historically bad numbers this year. Polanco, well below. He's starting to heat up a little bit, but you put it all together and then you get an in-season firing by a manager who 2 and 3 years ago was a finalist for manager of the year.
Yeah. It's it's so wild that it had to come to this, right? And not to mention, right, like last night, Jerry DePoto had an exclusive interview with Ken Rosenthal. And Ken Rosenthal asked if firing Scott Servais is on the table, and he said, we're looking at it as a possibility. So, writing's on the wall. You got swept twice on the road. You had one day of explosive offense in Pittsburgh and nothing. You lost every game you had the lead in. It's unacceptable. But for your manager to find out from Twitter, practically, and news sources in the morning after being a longtime friend, hired him, right? It's a tough scene. It really is. It stings a little more when it happens to your organization, the organization you root for, right?
It's
Because
if you
it
look at some of these things that have broke, especially in Seattle sports, it's tough because we're not following the full landscape. But like when Richard Sherman was getting cut, he learned from social
right.
media. That's the nature of the beast right now. And I know that it's part of the lifeblood on how we can promote ourselves and being the first and being that hot take. And it's probably detrimental to this podcast because I won't do it. I want to make sure that I'm informed. When I'm giving a take on here, I want to make sure that I truly believe it and I can explain why I can get behind it. I don't want to be the first. I don't want to be the overreactionary type of person. But I'm fired up about this because
Scott's done a lot
he's
with
been when the
the
times have been
minimal
good, they've been
lineup.
really good. And he's been the ultimate players coach. And you can still see that. I think that it was Maben was like, I'm not
Cameron
surprised.
Maven on foul territory today came out and said that Scott Servais is one of those open door policy guys, but if you come in my office, like that he's not a personal guy. We've heard the guy talk for 9 years. We've seen this team rally around Scott. He's been
And the
a
constraints
great,
that's
yeah,
put on him in that position, not only by the ownership, but he's not involved on who they go and make a deal for. He's not involved in those
yeah,
off-season signings. He's got to make do with what he's got. Has he made some bad decisions? Sure, every manager has. Has he made some phenomenal decisions? Yes, he has. Has Would Cal Raleigh be the player he is right now if when he came back up, Scott said, "Listen, I don't need you to do everything. You're pressing. I need you to hit the ball hard. I need you to hit the ball far, and I need you to control the snap." And Cal Raleigh has done that every step of the way. Maybe that's just catcher to catcher talk. Dan Wilson can do the same, but it does hurt. And the tough thing is, the Mariners have been stuck in subpar baseball and mediocrity for so long that Scott Servais, in the grand scheme of baseball managers, is just it's nothing, right? But for us, it's huge, and we glorify this because of the tough times that have went through. And I think that we can arguably say he's one of the top two managers
him and
that
Lou.
they've ever had. When you look at some of the guys that Lou Pinella's in that conversation as well, probably number one. But you look at the players that Lou Piniella had, it's a little ratchet up. You've got multiple guys that are in the Hall of Fame or are on track to be in the Hall of Fame that
Yes.
were under Lou Piniella. Right now with the Mariners, in the Scott Servais era, you're best chance right now is, I guess technically Ichiro was in that era because he came back right before retirement.
Mhm.
Felix he's going to be a late in the ballot guy if he makes it. And then your best shot really is Julio Rodriguez if he can rebound, which I anticipate him to do. But it's Jerry Dipoto too, and that's going to be the interesting thing with the firing today of Scott Servais and bringing in Dan Wilson. Before we dive too deep into this, I will give my one slightly humorous caveat. Is one reason I like this hire is because I do not want to hear Dan Wilson in the booth anymore.
He's
It
so boring.
it's the worst, but probably extremely good for a manager. He's going to sit there. This guy knows baseball. We know that by hearing it. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's a little too much where it's like, let's talk about the game. Let's not talk about obscure things. It's
Right?
the perfect type of person. But to tab him as the full-time manager, not the interim,
It's nuts,
it's wild.
dude.
It's
It's
wild.
nuts. I don't like. I guess we'll see how it goes, right?
What's
But I
what's the
didn't wait.
positive? What's the biggest positive of it? What's the
I,
biggest positive? You
I
like the
no
only thing I can
idea.
think of, catchers have turned out to be good managers. He's never managed a game in his life. You're making him the long-term manager, not even opening up the door for stuff. So you've
Like,
got to assume that Jerry Dipoto is still in office after this year. You don't
and
make that
that's
type of move if that's not the case.
and that's so
It
crazy
has to be that.
because, like, I get it. I get it. Dipoto is drafted great, drafted fantastic, right?
Identifying major league hitters has been the biggest hiccup for his regime.
Right. Like, didn't he get
Draft and develop, finding pitchers, phenomenal.
right? So then, who is his best signing as GM?
As a hitter,
Yeah,
I mean, you can technically count it as this. Like it's Julio Rodriguez. It has to be. But if you're
fair.
looking for outside of the organization, I'll even throw in some trades. Like your top guys that he's brought into this organization, it's probably JP Crawford.
Yes, I can agree with that. Carlos Santana, we'll throw that in a trade.
Carlos
Because
Santana batted 200 on the year. He was just clutch. He was
the
like older, wiser Cal Raleigh,
right.
right?
So
I
that
think
was
that in the long
huge.
run, Randy, unless he is truly on the downturn, is going to be a good key thing. Robles, I'm not ready to anoint him yet just because I want to see a little bit more. I am excited about what I've seen, and the extension I think is a good idea because worst case he is a number 4 outfielder with the
Yes,
potential to be a starting everyday above average player,
and he
right?
inherited basically Cano and Cruz, correct? And Seager.
Yes.
Okay, so we already had great hitters on this team prior, right? And never
I
got outside.
understood the teardown. I understood it because you have Nelson Cruz, who, yes, he did do some stuff after his time in Seattle as a strict DH. I understand that. But being able to get out of Cano when he did was a move in the long run. Hasn't necessarily panned out because your jewel was Kelnick and you haven't turned that into anything, right? Because Justin Dunn's not on this team anymore.
No,
I don't even remember the other guy that was in that deal.
I thought we got Justin Dunn and Justice Sheffield from the Yankees. Pretty sure
No, Dunn
Justin.
was a Met.
Okay.
But when you look at it was needed. The farm system was depleted. You were getting an older roster. You did need a reset. They did do the reset at the right time, but their timetable is 2021, right? That was when they were eyeing Astros potentially hitting a downturn based on their contracts and players and setting yourself up to make plays to be in that area. Going and signing Robbie Ray at the time, thought it was a great idea. Didn't pencil out because of injuries, right? I think
Yep.
that even in the year where he gave up the homer, not ideal, but he did have some phenomenal moments and was the horse of your lineup.
And the
Going and getting
tightest of
Luis Castillo,
pants.
another great deal, right?
Right. Worked out for us for a little bit. You know, I mean, he's still the workhorse, but he's on the down. He's on the downturn, and I do think that that's a name you look at this offseason as a potential dump.
Well, it's not even, I wouldn't even say it's a dump. You're going to get, you look at the trade deadline and starting pitching, and quality starting pitching is what you'll get from Luis Castillo. You still get quality starts from this guy. He pumps
Yes.
them out. He's going to get you at least 6 innings. Might give up a couple runs. It's kind of high strikeout numbers, and he's going to get deeper into games more often than not. So you put a little more offense around him, you can see that win total kick up. But with the bevy of prospects that were traded at the deadline for guys that aren't as accomplished as him, like you can get a haul for him, and then you can take what you got from that haul and some of your own prospects and go get that hitter of the future. The tough thing is your holes on this team going forward are at first base and are at third base. I do love Josh Rojas. I think that he would be a key piece on being that Swiss Army knife a la Dylan Moore, right? Because he can play multiple positions. His defense as of late hasn't been as great at third base, but he's second in baseball at third base and now it's above average. Like
He's been
you like that,
phenomenal.
but the stick hasn't been there consistently all year. So
it fell apart. It fell apart for him.
You have an opportunity to go look at those positions. Those positions are the hardest to find right now. If they can go in the offseason and sign Christian Walker from the Diamondbacks, probably the best thing they can do, right? You're not going to go get Pete Alonso. He's a similar profile to what you've seen with this team, where it's boom or bust. I like with Walker, averages a little bit higher, and he does have
first. He's got a good glove. He's got a good glove at first too.
But the real play would be if you can somehow put a package together to go get Vladdy and be able to extend him right away. Right. That's the play that has to be made. And to do that, if you get prospects from whatever organization and you take two of your top, Cole Young, Harry Ford, one of the top prospects you get in that deal, obviously is going to be a top 100 type guy, and you throw that person into the deal, I think that the Blue Jays are going to sit there and go, hey guys, this is too good to pass up. Is Vladdy going to come back? I think Bo's gone. Are we sure we can keep Vladdy? Are we sure?
Right.
Because we've got all this control in these players. It's going to be a tough sell, but that's the type of moves that you need to make because they're in a position with the pitching staff that they have going forward with the youth where Kirby and Gilbert can be your workhorses.
Yeah, and you also, if you let's say there's a hypothetical trade for Vlad, then you throw Locklear in that because if you're extending Vlad, right?
You have to.
Because you're talking about Christian Walker, right? We practically have Christian Walker and Tyler Locklear. That's the type of profile that I see Locklear having. They have about the same
numbers are still
a little high, but you see that when he's down in Tacoma, he is tearing the ball apart. He is absolutely shitting on the ball at every. I see it every day, just about, right? There's a rare day I see him go 0 for something, but that's who you kind of have down there. He's a high power number guy who probably could hit the middle of your lineup for a pretty decent clip.
And there's nothing at third base position that's going to be available that gets you excited. The top guy is going to be Chapman again.
Yeah,
I don't want Chapman. I don't want him.
He's doing all right this year.
Oh, sorry. The top guy is Bregman. If the Mariners go out and sign Alex Bregman, I'll contemplate not being a fan.
Yes.
I do not want Alex Bregman on this team at all.
No.
And that might just be the fan in me, but I know there's some numbers that are there, but I just can't stand the guy. Can't stand him.
No, I can't either. But it's just a very unfortunate day for the organization. And like I said, it is for me, it is very unfortunate to see Jerry still being in charge and in large next year. Because I mean, he has just also made some real head scratchers.
Well, and the tough thing is you wonder if the mentality or if there's just so much pressure going on in Seattle, or if it's really the ballpark that's playing that much into it. Ty France off the team has had better numbers. No, we're looking at smaller sample size. Kelnick's had a little bit of a resurgence at parts of the season, but it's kind of fell back to what he has. But the average is up, and Teoscar's having a breakout year. But in some of that, when you're not asked to be the man, just a man on the team, it's a little bit easier because when you look at this team, you look at the likes of
I mean, Mitch Garver. Let's just throw that one out there to start, right? You are the only free agent that they bring in, right? They believe in you that much. They sign you to a 2 year, $20 million deal, right? You are supposed to be the guy you were in Texas. That's what they were paying for, correct? That's what we all thought. I understand the pressure. This guy, every time I would play coach in high school, because he coached my rivals in high school, it was the toughest game for me because I put so much pressure on myself, right? And what did you do? First at bat, 3 straight curveballs because you knew I would swing.
Just a good coach. Maybe the manager
Right,
should give old Coach Red a call. Get back in the game. They
right.
called Dan the man first.
But you, I get the pressure, right? And Garver has talked about it throughout the year. So that's kind of one thing to throw out
Well, you
there.
have Julio's got the weight of this team. Cal's got the weight. Cal can maneuver it well enough, right? JP's
Right.
got the pressure on this team. When he came back from injury the first time, you could see that he's pressing. Julio doesn't have the power numbers. He's pressing. Mitch
I
Garver wants
mean,
to be the guy. He's pressing. Haniger's on the return. He's pressing. Luke Rayleigh has been the guy at times. He's trying to be the guy every day. What
yeah.
we need is a little bit more Victor Robles, right? You go out and have some fun. You might hit the ball out of the park. You might hit a single. You might drop down a bunt, but you
Yeah.
can see the joy that he's bringing and the looseness that he brings to the game. You look at Turner and Randy when they first came on, hot to trot, baby. This roadie, Rosarena batted under 100. Turner batted just over 100. And when you look at that as a whole, it's because they're the guys. When you brought them in, we know we're in a playoff race. We're coming from places where we weren't in a playoff race. Let's go make this push, especially for Turner. It's his last ride, right?
Yep.
He's got some pressure on him. And Randy is the guy. He was the biggest name moved offensively at the deadline. The
Yep.
acumen that this guy has. And when you have no JP at the beginning, you have no Julio, you saw a little spark. And the big thing that really hurts right now, which they're saying may change on this homestand, Julio could get back in the field because having Julio having to only DH hamstrings this lineup so much because it really limits what you can do. Because ideally, Mitch Haniger gets 90% of his at bats from the DH spot. Ideally, Mitch Garver gets his one catch a day and maybe one day at the DH spot. You've got Polanco whose knees acting up a little bit and is getting pulled later in games. With him hitting the ball the way he is, you would love to let him just roll in the DH spot, but you can't do that right now because Julio can't play in the field. Did you bring him back too early so you could make that splash? And he's a young guy. He's the face of the franchise. He wants to get back. So
Yeah.
you make that move because you need it. The problem is Jerry and
He's
the
not done
owners
bad.
need to put this team in a position. Yes, when you lose the likes of Julio, it's going to hurt no matter what team he's on, right? But you don't have to need it that bad.
Right.
It's
I
not like
mean,
Giancarlo Stanton when he was injured, rush back.
you just go through the last couple of years of signings, right? Last year was the big trade with Teoscar, and then you signed AJ Pollock, Colton Wong,
Trade
and
for Colton
Jess,
Wong.
and then you got what? Uh, who was the third guy? Third guy. I thought he was in the middle.
It was Wong, Listella, and Pollock were your three. And
And then
Teoscar.
and Teoscar, and then 3 out of the 4 guys weren't on your team after the deadline.
Mm,
Like that's
it's tough.
horrendous. Jesse Winker, when you got him, right?
Well, Jesse Winker went in the Colton Wong deal.
Right. But the year prior, right? You got Jesse Winker, and you're like, oh, a big
Gino
lefty
was the guy
power
from that
stick.
deal.
Right. And so you're like, you just get a big boy like lefty stick, and then he flubbed out. And Gino was good and then just declined and then kind of got hot again.
It's tough, and I think that unfortunately, I wish things wouldn't have played out the way they did because
Yeah.
obviously this team needed a change, and it sucks how it all played out for Scott because I think the city just really gravitated towards him because he just kept pushing through, right? And he would sit there, he'd he brought the fun differential to this squad, and because he was always talking like, yeah, our run differential might be low, but our fun differential is high. And
Mm-hmm.
that's in the gloom and gutters of what can be Seattle. The rain, the less than fortunate years in sports. You've had the Huskies make it to a national title game. You've had the Kraken make the playoffs one of the first 3 years. You've had the Seahawks win a Super Bowl, go back to a Super Bowl. But for a long while, this city starves for a good baseball team, and they show out and they support like crazy. I've watched more Mariners baseball this year than I have watched in a single year in a long, long time.
This
And a
is
lot
the
of that is
most games I've
expectations,
watched.
but the other part of it is how much I gravitate towards the thought of Scott Servais. And the you're a little bit more hot taking and get fired up, and I'm a little bit more stay the course. Like things will work themselves
It's
out.
true.
You don't want to get too high and too low because things ebb and flow in life, in sports, and everything.
Yeah.
And I thought Scott Servais rode that pretty well. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. I
And
hope that Dan Wilson does a great job. Edgar
and
Martinez is
also,
back in the
welcome back,
building,
Edgar.
which he did do some all right things as a hitting coach in the past. And you're trying to bring back the 95. I saw someone else post on X today. The Mariners are also bringing back Randy Johnson as the team photographer.
Yeah, I saw that too. It
So,
was really funny.
I mean, we need to get. I know that Bone's out of state now, but we need to get him back out
And the
here
boys are back
as
in
the team
town.
mascot. Screw the moose. Get the moose out of here. Tell him the Bones sent you, dude. That guy. That's a guy that I would love in this clubhouse. Who, with his heart and soul, is 100% behind the Mariners, and I love to see it when a guy would hit a ground ball to second when he was on Tuesday nights, and he's just going miss it, miss it, miss it, miss it, miss it.
Yeah. He's a ride or die.
And
He's a
that's what you
ride
need
or
to see.
die.
And Dan Wilson's a ride or die. I don't want to discredit that.
Yeah. I really hope Dan Wilson knows what he's doing. I really do. I really hope that they let him construct lineups because I do want to see a Dan Wilson lineup. And that's going to be the interesting thing about tomorrow night's game, right? Is what is the first lineup of Dan Wilson? And the media is going to be all over this. The media is already criticizing the Mariners organization enough, right? As of right now. And mid-season firing of Scott Servais and putting a guy in there that has no managerial experience is wild.
Especially when you have Manny Acta, who has been a manager before, as your third base coach. You have Christopher Negron, who after he retired, the Mariners brought him in as a minor league manager, and within 1 year, they already brought him to the major league staff. You see what Stephen Vogt is doing right now after his 1 year being the Mariners bullpen coach, right? You're seeing these things, and they are good people, right? That's the thing, is it's a people business. It's not like the people that are just elated that Scott is gone. He's a good person.
He's a really good person. He
And
cares. He cares more about the city than most.
that's the tough thing, is at the end of the day, it's a business. If you're not getting the job done, there has to be changes that are made. And it's going to be very interesting to see what changes are made as the rest of this season goes along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's true. I mean, we have what 35 games left around ballpark, you
Let's
know.
go back to 95, baby. Refuse to lose.
Hey,
That's what they got
we're
to
we're
do.
already there, baby. We're already there.
But they actually have to go
So
out and do the damn thing.
yeah, they really need to show out this homestand. And Dan Wilson, I guess, needs to make a statement as manager. We'll see what he does.
We'll see what he does, and you can see what we do over on social media. You can find me, your boy, Coach Red, on X at the Real Coach Red, on Instagram at the Real _ Coach Red, TikTok at the Real Coach Red. Also, find the show over on YouTube. Search Kicking It with Coach Red. Like, subscribe, hit the bell notifications, leave a comment or two. Kane, where you at?
Find me over on Twitter, Kane2406, TikTok, Kane0624. Also follow the show's socials over on Twitter and Instagram at Coach Red Pod. Follow. Do it, freaking do it.
And welcome to a fired up Coach Red episode. You do not get these that often. So go ahead and share this one out with your friends. And as always, stay fresh.
Stay fresh, peeps.
Peace.